when I first started to get into gills, like I said, it was a hollow belly frog, Fred's frog. Maybe a lot of you guys remember Fred winning that big tournament way back in the day. Fred Rambanis on on the frog, talking about fish eating gills and imitating gills with the frog. On the Delta, it's huge. Before I started throwing swim baits, all my large fish came on frogs. It's a trophy bait to me. I fish it slow. I target gill eaters. Really, all I throw the color anymore is Fred's frog. That's all I throw. It just catches big fish. That's why I do it. So anyways, so I was akin to these gill eaters. They were my favorite. I'll wait all year to throw hollow belly frogs to target gill eaters to get my big fish. Lost a lot of fish on crankbaits early in the year, crawdad eaters, but huge fish on small trebles, low percentage. So anyways, I got into swim baits real heavy and just threw the rats. Did really great on the rats. Then as I branched out, those people who made gill baits back then, not very many lipped gill baits, but there was gill imitators. And I had a job and a full plate. I made enough baits. I really didn't want to go into making a gill bait. So my friend, Stephen Morgan, when he was making baits, made this crazy, coolest bait, man. Ball and socket fins that move, articulate. I changed the joint on that because I broke it. But I started throwing this really cool bait. You can see it's really large with fins everywhere. It had a hard tail on it also. I changed that too. But beautiful bait, great bait, just a chunk. And I started getting these really big bites during certain times of the year. But the success rate was like 0 on the big fish, like maybe because I wasn't fully prepared, but it was substantial. So my determination was when you have these gill baits, I love bulky baits that, especially fat baits, it's a great technique, or it's a great shape for your lure to have when a fish is looking up. But it was just like it had a short wheelbase and a tall body, plus the fins that are protruding here. It's just, I came to realize that to target these fish, I needed to develop something that, in my opinion, would put them in the boat, like give you all the advantages you could have, right? So, maybe I just didn't spend enough time with this lure, but it was just in my head, and I make baits, so the journey began. I made this out of wood. I made gill baits. This was one of my first gill baits I made a long time ago. It's caught tons and tons of fish. Little flat mouth, which actually makes it swim on the surface. Lipless wake bait, but has a pretty good head nod. I caught a lot of fish on this, It was whatever, but I needed a large lipped wake bait to target these gill eaters that were eating over these weed beds. So when I look at nature, and bluegills specifically, nature develops in ways where predator and prey have advantages on both sides. So bluegills develop these defense mechanisms, and they don't have poison or, a lot of times they have camouflage, but they can be brightly colored. They have bright tails that give them up, usually. But they develop this body shape, and as largemouth bass, which are essentially big bluegill, became these predator fish, they elongated and came longer. They're still tall in stature, but bluegills are shaped not to get eaten. My old dog, when I was a kid, tried to eat a bluegill backwards, tail first, and my dad had to reach down there, and get it out of there, because their fins go out and that's it. They're stuck in there. So, and their body shape is very large. It's not like a minnow, or a shad where it's slim with soft fins or spiny rape, So, not only, I wasn't thinking like, oh, this is a defense mechanism, I need to imitate this to look real. I'm thinking these features are designed so that a fish can't eat this. So I'm not a fan of fins on baits at all. Hard fins on baits, soft fins I imagine get right out of the way. I think they kind of impede action, but that's bait builder stuff. So I developed this Wade Hoggs. I wanted it to be fat, but not fatter than my treble hooks, which is kind of key, you know. And then everything came around that. But this Wade Hoggs came into existence in this minimalist format with the soft tail and stuff, because I wanted nothing, the fish, I wanted the fish to be able to eat it. So I didn't lose them. I mean, what's the point in hooking them if you can't get them to the boat, right? So the Wade Hoggs came around, and it was crazy. You know, it was crazy the way I started to see these fish eat and come up. So that just started this evolution into me making these and people doing well. So what I found was bass, all the warmer months, definitely eat bluegill. Even in the winter, if they get on schools of crappie, I think you could find fish that will specifically target those, but I think those are in the minority. In the wintertime, they just like to eat little shad. I mean, huge fish will eat tiny things. And also, you know, certain lakes, they eat huge bait like trout or whatever. But during these warmer months, I feel like a bluegill imitation can always be used to target quality fish. Now, I found in the transition times, whether it be post-spawn transition, after the spawn, into summer. Well, if you started really like the very beginning of spring can be good, but I feel like the transition out of spring into summer, and then right now, when I'm recording this, in late fall to late fall, depending on how every year is different. But so you can't really say the month, but those two times, the biggest fish in the area, if you're in a body of water that they target gills, the biggest fish are not just eating the bluegills along with everything else. They're specifically targeting them on flats or transition areas where bluegills are staging before they move into the deeper zones for the wintertime. So that's what really intrigued me, was this in the fall. I was getting bites over 10 pounds in areas that I caught quality fish before, but nothing like, not in areas that they frequented all summer. They were moving to these areas specifically to target only bluegill profiled baits. It's all I could get bites on. I was living on the water at the time, spending tons of time on the water. I was lucky enough to do that because I had that job that I got a ton of time off. So I was just out there all the time, and it just, when you're targeting these fish in the weedy environments, they will eat the bluegill on the submerged retrieve, swim jig, a bigger profiled soft bait like this. This is one of my favorite big gill imitators. This was a burrito. This is like a buzz bait. This is a working class zero. The body shape is really good. Even this little dream smasher can come into play if they're, you know, if it's, so what I'm gonna say is, in the fall, the weeds can be so prevalent that the water can be very clear. It's a super, you know, all the weeds are filtering it. You know, every body of water is different. Like I say, I know in the South, or certain areas might have muddier water, or rain, or something like that. California, it doesn't freaking rain. So you'll have these clear water and clear water pockets. Even in muddier places, when they're in the weeds, you'll have pockets of clear water, and the fish will gravitate to them or sit on the edges. So when you're throwing stuff like this, especially in the fall, especially for big eaters that are being very specific to the bait, I feel like you have to be super critical with your presentation. 16-pound fluorocarbon, very long casts. The seam line has to be perfect, and the bites, I didn't get as many bites as I did on this. Now, I was using this before and losing them, but when you're getting that many more bites, I would wait for the conditions to align. Moon is very important. Wind is very important on my body of water. They'll eat super early, super late. But in general, putting this over their head with this awkward action and allowing them to eat up and get the treble hooks, high percentage spot, or it's a high percentage presentation. You're able to use the heavier line, the thicker hooks, even though people will argue that you get more bites, or if you get the bite on the soft bait is coming in. That's not always the case, especially with gill eaters, because they know that it's a hard prey item to eat, so they'll try to kill it and crush it, and they'll eat it and spit it. So a lot of times, even with this style bait, they'll eat it from the side, especially if you live in a body of water where they ambush eat. When I talk about that in clear water, where if rocky environments, they'll follow. Usually in weedy environments, laydowns and stuff, they'll wait till the last second, shoot out and grab it. Well, when it's like that, they don't get to track it, so they just get it wherever they can. So if they get it from the side, most likely they're just gonna chomp it and spit it, reposition, and eat it head first, because that's how they have to eat it if it's a larger bait. So when you have those ambush eaters that just dart out and chew, I feel like your treble hooks are gonna get them, when a lot of times the weedless or whatever the presentation you have to use, it can be low presentation. It's not always like single hook, get them in the low percentage, sorry. It's not always just single hook, put them in the boat. So I just felt like this was the best presentation to give them, and it started working. And I put a 45-pound limit in the boat, and started catching all these big fish, and then more people around the nation started catching these big fish. So as my understanding of the gill eaters expanded, that's only 2 seasons where I felt like this was the optimal presentation. Or, springtime, of course, because they're just eating everything. Late, post spawn, through the summer it works great too. I mean, I'm not trying to say, but I felt like that was its wheelhouse. So I made this right away, this 3-piece that I just released this year, the Wade 3, just because I just made it, because that's what bait makers do. And I gave it to a couple friends around here, and they had it for years and crushed on it. I've also made silent joint versions of this that's closed with a pin. It's just this joint, this setup, it's so effective, it's crazy. So I made this, I sat this on the burner. I just thought this has a different sound profile, has a different wiggle. In my opinion, your larger bites come on 2-piece weight baits. I mean, just look at history. That's all you have to do. People don't like the way they swim sometimes. They think they look awkward. Just look at the history books of large fish. Even MS Slammer, the wake bait that got me into it, you wanted that one that was awkward and kind of like clumsy, and you don't throw the 3-piece or the double jointed, you just throw the single joint and smash. So anyways, I made that has its place. I didn't make this specifically because people have preference. Fish have preference day to day. Sound profile could be different. The wiggle could be different. Every body of water, I know that fish can have a preference. So that's why I made this, not to be better or worse or outperform, just I had a different option. Just like the chorizo. I thought I grabbed my chorizo. Looks like I don't have it, but it's thicker. It's a little wider than this bait. 3-piece, different joint profile, has fins like the whippersnapper. But it's another 3-piece bait, different joint, different sound. It's just a different look. I think that everywhere you go, fish can have a preference. So I'm not building all these models of baits to improve on the last. It's just cool. I like to make cool baits, and I thought it would be a good bait and tried it out. It catches fish. I don't know how much more depth, because like I bake them, I test them, people test them, they're successful, I put them out. But each bait can definitely be, specifically applied for certain applications, just like there's tons of crankbaits out there and all the different stuff. So, and then the whippersnapper came around out of the slob stopper. I have the walking slob stopper baits. Those are great baits for fish that are targeting bluegills, the same as like a frog. They're just a walking bait. Every bait has its time. The walking baits I throw in the hot summer. When it's like the midsummer, late in the day, you throw the big chungus or the slob stopper walking bait, spook. There's not a lot of bluegill profiled walking, gliding topwaters like a punker style bait, but anything like that walks can be a bluegill imitator. So I throw those in the heat of the summer. Those seem to be produce well. The fall, I really like to throw the big chungus. It doesn't get hardly any bites, like really minimal, but when they bite, they're really big because they're targeting those big bluegill. So as the season progresses, there's different options. Maybe in the heat of the summer too, this gets so many bites. It's unbelievable. The whippersnapper. You move to that smaller profile bluegill, everything eats it. 2-pounders to 8-pounders. It's just like why only have one bait if you have the option to have all these different sizes and presentations. You never know what the conditions are going to call for. So, but when you're targeting bluegill eaters, it's pretty simple. As when you find them, you find a patch of bluegills, the fish are around. In the cover around where the bluegills are holding, the fish will just be staged back, and they might be eating them at night. They might be eating them certain times. They'll patrol the area. You'll see bass patrol around groups of bluegill if you really watch and sit in one area, and then they'll dart in every 30 minutes. They're very unpredictable eaters. But during those transition times, springtime, post-spawn, the bluegills are on beds. So the fish are around all those bluegill beds. And during the spawn, they know they don't like gills. So you could just wake them very slowly around these areas that they're feeding on these bluegills and wait for one to dart out and grab it, because that's all they're waiting for anyways, is an opportunity. So, when you're targeting bluegill eaters, I don't think there's a big science to it. I just feel like these give me the best advantage because bluegill, where I'm at, seem to inhabit super clear water. They really like to be in the weeds or in open pockets in the weeds, and you can target them. Like a frog could be great because it's such a natural presentation. You can target them with these style baits. But if you have a lot of cover and ambush predators, and a little ripple on the water or even none, and you could slow roll these through shade pockets to wake bait like that. The bass are programmed to take advantage of any opportunity they can, especially with bluegills, because it's such a hearty meal, and you have to, it's a chore. It's not like slurping a shad. So, when you approach those fish that way, and you approach them with a waked, with a bait that's over their head, where they have to eat the trebles to get them out, I feel like you're you're at an advantage. So, the Wade Hoggs and the whippersnapper and this and the chorizo and the slob stopper and the big chungus are all bluegill based baits that I have, and they all are kind of just a little different sound profile, a little different size, a little different wiggle. Every fisherman has their preference, but when I developed this, it was to target these transitional fish in the seasons when they're specifically eating these bigger bluegill, and that's why the Wade Hoggs is smooth like this, and it has a little bit of roll to it, and the profile is it's perfect. I don't understand why this bait is as effective as it is, but with the joint profile and the knock nationwide, it's accumulated double digit after double digit after double digit. I mean, just recently Washington State double digits, and East Coast. It's caught fish everywhere. It still blows my mind. So, you know, if you're not a bluegill wake bait fisherman, hard bait fisherman, maybe that'll help you bridge into gaining some confidence in them. That it's not always the easiest way to catch them with super imitators like this, because they can scrutinize them so well, and sometimes they don't always get them. They don't always snatch them, and when they see that prey struggling on the surface, they know they have a wall to eat it against. They can't go anywhere. It's when they could really take advantage, and they do. And you could catch some of the biggest fish in the lake when that happens. So hopefully it wasn't too much of a rant and rave, and maybe I introduced you to a little bit about the baits, and why I made what I did. So that's the hogs and the snapper. Those are my two dudes right there, pretty much, in the gill lineup. Two profiles, two applications, both hold their place, but I mean, this is always tied on.